When I was told that I was to follow the minister, I had a really bad night's sleep because it's a pretty hard act to follow. And I just want to first to acknowledge and congratulate you, Minister, on first of all achieving ministerial status, because it was well overdue, I have to say, and a just reward for years of hard political graft, determination and effort. But more importantly, Hekia's leadership in developing the Māori potential framework while policy manager with Te Puni Kōkiri was foundational in promoting a whole new way of looking and thinking about Māori and about whānau, moving from a deficit analysis, which inevitably led government agencies toward a narrow focus on Māori need, to one which is focused on Māori strengths, both present and future. I would like to think that Te Komihana a Whānau has been diligent in pursuing that kaupapa and that the report builds on your earlier work. Unlike Hekia, I have to speak from notes because I'll be 71 next month and I'm suffering from creeping dementia. 2 years ago, I spoke at a senior public servant forum and took my PowerPoint ready to make a huge impact and found instead that I had on my PowerPoint a sermon from the book of Nehemiah. And it was a critical moment and decided that I would deliver the sermon on rebuilding the wall of Jerusalem. And at the end of it, there was dead silence. And then a senior public servant, who I'm very grateful for, stood up and said it was the best lecture on strategic planning that he'd ever heard. I just first of all want to say that this has been a difficult day for me because, I keep looking around for my kahanunu mate, Megan, who was a member of our whānau reference group and a really dear and close friend. On my last visit to her house, we sat on her veranda and I ate all her home baking, and we talked about how to prune a wisteria because he has this beautiful wisteria vine. And the words of John Milton came to my mind. Grace was in all her steps, heaven in her eyes, in every gesture, dignity and love. Haere rā hene kua ngaro i te pō. But this has been a great day as well. The shared stories which underpinned ideas, opinions, attitudes and vision traversed a range of human experience, stories of struggle and sacrifice, bitterness and belittlement, of revelation and reward. Each story was unique. They had their own historical period, I was going to say hysterical period, their own tribal and cultural foundation. We've heard all about Ngāti Porou. Kahununu don't speak of themselves like that. Humility is one of our chief values. But there were also common themes that emerged. On the positive side, the opportunity to develop social constructs and ways of doing things that validate who we are as Māori. That was accompanied by the struggle for legitimacy, for empowerment and for recognition. I am well aware of the significant personal sacrifices that many of you have made over many years in the struggle for social equality and for the right of Māori to function within a Māori construct. Looking back over 50 years of public service, it seems to me that the same challenges, the same constraints, the same bureaucratic impediments presented themselves time and time again. In my earlier career as a police officer, attitudes toward Māori certainly contributed to a 50% rise in offending by Māori youth between 1954 and 1958. I remember with great affection a feisty Māori community officer by the name of Iritana Tawhiwhirangi, working tirelessly with whānau who came to the Wellington region to work in our factories and freezing works. The two tangata program introduced in the 1970s under the leadership of Karapuka Tapu was a welcome expression of Māori self-determination. Mātua Whāngai, a program that encouraged whānau to take responsibility for their own children, kindled passion among Māori to discourage welfare officers and the judiciary from placing neglected and uncared for children into institutional care. As a police youth aid officer in the early 70s, I spent 3 days a month at the Kohitere Child Welfare Institution and saw at first hand the dreadful conditions under which upward of 120 children were ostensibly cared for by the state. The confidential listening service led by Judge Carol Henwood is today recording the stories of historical abuse from some very damaged elders. By 1985, the situation had reached a critical point, and in 1985, Pipitea Atatu, the Ministerial Advisory Committee of a Māori Perspective for the Department of Social Welfare, under the chairmanship of the late John Rangiho, set out to address the lack of cultural understanding within the system. Its final recommendations talked about the need to attack cultural racism, to eliminate deprivation and alienation through the reallocation of resources and the sharing of power and authority. I was privileged to be an advisor to that committee and sit at the feet of John Rangiho, Lena Manuel and others, understanding for the first time the extent of institutionalised racism in this nation, especially in regard to our children. The 1991 Child and Young Persons Act was a major step forward to the deinstitutionalisation of our children and an outcome of Te Rangiho's work. By that time, as head of prisons, I was confronting the realities of racism within that system. Māori prison officers were forbidden to speak Māori to prisoners or to their colleagues, and any prisoner who wrote a letter in Māori had it destroyed. I could go on. Suffice to say that over the last 50 years, regardless of the period, regardless of the situation or circumstance, the cycle of non-acceptance, resistance and undermining of Māori manifests itself in an array of different situations and in different forms. The recommendations from the 1986 Pipitea Atatu report should be framed on the wall of every minister of the Crown and every public servant. I can only hope that the consultation process that will accompany the Green Paper on vulnerable children includes an historical analysis and considers why the promises of Pipitea Atatu were not fully realised. Let me be honest. Almost every positive Māori initiative since the Māori Council Act of 1900 has been scuttled, and almost without exception, it has had something to do with the reluctance to share resources, power and authority. In recent days, the spectre of the Te Kohanga Reo movement being forced to lodge a claim with the Waitangi Tribunal serves as a reminder that nothing much has changed. On the positive side, I have been privileged today to hear those wonderful whānau stories and know that just simply focusing on the deficits is a waste of time and energy. And for someone who's so closely involved in the criminal justice system, it's a relief to spend a day with people who are so positively inclined. I want to share with you a little story from my own whānau. In 1861, my great-grandfather, Wiremu Whakamua, he was known as, came from Cape Palliser to spend his first day in Wellington. 6'4", the son of a beautiful Māori mother and a Scots father. He happened upon the Kaiwharawhara stream just down the road a little here, which was flooded, and there were a group of Pākehā people trying to cross but realising that they couldn't. Because he was 6'4", he was wearing his father's kilt, as I understand it. He was particularly noticed the wife of William Main Smith, who was the surveyor for the company, the New Zealand company, had an urgent meeting, and he saw an opportunity, so he offered to carry her across the stream for a penny, and she accepted. And they got halfway, the water was raging, he slipped, and she dipped a little bit into the water and got her pants wet. And she said, "You stupid man," and hit him across the head. And he steadied himself. He rose to his full 6'4" and said, "Madam, the price has just gone up to threepence." Now, I think that is an example. It's either of, Scotsmen wanting to make a bob or Māori adaptation. And so, that story is carried with me through my life. Whenever I'm in a business relationship, I know that if my partner gets his pants wet, it's time to raise the price. And so we learn from those values. But I want to say that the 3 years with the Families Commission has been an entirely different experience. For the first time in a lengthy career, it became possible to do kaupapa Māori policy and research within a mainstream organisation. What sets this experience apart from the earlier struggles? Let me tell you why I think this experience has been different. Firstly, there was a collective recognition within the Commission that it had failed to meet its legislative requirement to meet the needs of Māori as tangata whenua. It took very little persuasion for the commissioners to mandate a body of work toward that direction. Secondly, the Commission was undergoing at that time constant criticism from the media, the public, and across the political spectrum. That experience served to closely unite the commissioners and staff, and their solidarity resulted in widespread internal support to pursue a kaupapa Māori agenda, bordering on defiance. While non-Māori staff acknowledged that they had neither the confidence nor the capability to do that work, they were mostly supportive, and with the support of our Chief Commissioner and Chief Executive, we developed the capacity to deliver. There were fights, standoffs, and the occasional minor volcanic eruption, mainly from myself. But with the kaupapa as our navigating star and the support of our whānau reference group, headed in later years by Dame Iritana Tawhiwhirangi, that name again, we made some changes. Thirdly, the Commission was not in competition with any other government agency. We saw our role as one of adding value to the efforts of others. Whānau Ora would be led by Te Puni Kōkiri. Family violence was the primary responsibility of the Ministry of Social Development. We were not in the race. Instead, our role was to stand on the sideline, cheer the others on, and ensure that our policy and research advice served as an intellectual nourishment for the journey ahead. Fourthly, we introduced storytelling into the policy process. recognising that our advocacy role was not only about engaging minds, but engaging hearts. I learnt that when I told a story which made Christine Rankin cry, I was on a winner. I would urge you all to share your stories with anyone who is willing to listen. They have the potential to change the attitudes of those who might otherwise feel obliged to restrain our initiative and innovation. Fifthly, we engage with the power of positivity. Focusing on the deficits of a situation is ultimately debilitating and depressing. We have instead focused on success, innovation and enterprise, and what it takes to replicate that across the Māori population. Most of all, I learned to rely on the superb intellectual and analytical skills of others. The Māori staff at the Commission have made me look good, and in particular, the passion and rigour of Dr. Cathy Irwin, who has driven our kaupapa. There are more good days to come. The report, whānau, yesterday, today and tomorrow, will, I believe, surprise many. While it sits comfortably on a foundation and within a scaffolding of academic rigour, the stories contained within them hold a great deal of wisdom and insight about the nature of whānau, both in the distant past, the pivotal present, and the uncertain future. The report is, for me, the culmination of 3 years' work, and I am proud to be part of it. It has had a huge personal impact on me. A month ago, my youngest son, who's 20, and who has been a challenge, and his lovely partner, and the baby, we took the whenua of the baby back up to Raupunga. And my boy's adopted, he's from Ngāti Pāhūera. And when we got there, with the 14 of us all together, and the kaumātua from there, Charlie King and others, and my boy's birth father and mother, explained the whānau connections, the history, the gossip, the fights. Over the next 2 days, we visited the cemetery, we talked to people, and I could see my boy changing before my eyes as he started to make these connections with his whānau. And at the end of it, we went back to Napier and sat in the hot pools for a couple of hours. And then I unloaded at the Loaded Hog, cost me a mint. It was my boy's 20th birthday by then. And he's a young man of very few words. And we had our beautiful children with us, and as we ate and talked, and then all of a sudden, he caught us by surprise. He said, Dad, I want to say something. So he stood up and he said, I intend to be the best father in the world, and sat down. That's whānau. Kia ora tātou.